I think the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to another episode of the Rocket Your Dollar podcast. And I'm really excited to talk with today's guest because we're going to see each other live and in person at one of their flagship events in Texas later this year. So, kind of excited to be able to just have a precursor. I'll have him talk a little bit about his event and his background, but I'll let you introduce yourself, but I'll go ahead and introduce the name. So Markian is with us, and he's going to talk about how he built this amazingly large community and the event centered around this, but how to help military personnel become private and alternative investors. So that's what we're all about here at Rocket Dollar. So our product obviously helps them access some of the old TSP accounts. So if you're a veteran, active military, you happen to be catching this episode, or you know someone who is, Markian and his group is a good group to connect to them. But Markian, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and the community and the business, and we'll kind of get into all things and what makes you the alternative investor coach that you are.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Henry. It's an absolute pleasure. Where do I start? I can talk a little bit about my story, and then I'll kind of explain how that weaves into what we do right now. So I am a third generation immigrant who really is kind of a first generation immigrant because I was just happenstance and serendipity. I ended up being born in the country of my immigration origin and then lived there until I was 15 and a half because my parents, who were second generation, they moved back there because of Chernobyl and everything. Believe it or not, my dad was a nuclear engineer, PhD student at MIT, and decided to go there to study Chernobyl and write his dissertation on that. So, and then he ended up continuing to work in Ukraine most of the time, and that's why I lived there till I was about 15 and a half. So that's the world I came from. Was a very different world than growing up in the States. And then I was kind of thrown into the American life, landed in Knoxville Catholic High School, living with my grandparents. I left my family. I was the oldest of 7 siblings. They still lived in Ukraine. I repatriated alone because my parents kind of knew that, hey, it was actually, I would say, mostly my choice, but like everybody was kind of like, kind of nudging me like, hey, you should probably go back to the United States because we're all eventually going to repatriate, and you're already 15 and a half. You probably need to go through that culture shock sooner rather than later instead of like figuring it out in college or later. So I was like, okay, cool. And plus my cousin sold me the dream. It was like, hey, we're going to have a car with our top down and girls in the back. All these American movies, like that's how it really is. And I was like, awesome. So I'm going to go to America, going to figure this out. And it was a culture shock. It was I walked into this like private Catholic high school with a leather jacket on, long hair, and everybody's like, who is this kid? Like, cause I was all about soccer and everything. And then I heard like my first mom joke and I almost got in a fight. I was like, what is this nonsense? And then push came to shove, like I figured it out. And I actually really grew to love, the country of my citizenship, right? And because it had adopted my entire family on both sides. And I started wondering, like, what makes America tick? Like, why is it? I remember visiting every summer too. Like, I'd go to like Dollywood, go ride a roller coaster, and then come back to my Ukrainian friends, and I'd be like, guys, it's insane there. Like, America's awesome, And they were, and like when I was born, my mom had to wait 2 hours in line to get milk. It was like a very different world, and so I was kind of like had this seeded in me early on, was like, I need to figure out what makes America America, essentially. And then it really started growing in me was when I got into the Naval Academy. I was graduating, and I started realizing what I was actually going to be making as an officer in the military. Not complain, especially if you're listening to this, you're going to be like, oh, shut up. But like, I just realized it wasn't that astronomical. Like, it wasn't going to be that much money. And I started looking at the military pay chart, and I was like, oh, like I have to look at a spreadsheet to figure out what my value is, and there's nothing I could do to make more. And even that I figured out. I tested out on some languages, but like I was like, what is like? And so I tried to figure out like how to make more money. And especially when I started dating my now wife, it was long distance. I was in Pensacola, Florida in flight school. She was in France studying winemaking. I wanted to go fly and see her all the time and show her a great time. And that costs a lot of money. And I was like, so I got into all sorts of things like credit card hacking, you name it, tried to save as much money. I was like living in the cheapest way possible. And then finally I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad and 4 Hour Work Week, and I discovered real estate. And after diving in, I was like, I firmly started believing that real estate investing was the cornerstone of American wealth. It was the and how the IRS tax code is designed around benefiting real estate investors.
Yeah.
I everything started clicking, and I was like, I think this is what makes America tick. And I went all in, basically, on real estate
Mhm.
investing. So that's kind of like the origin story, if you will.
That's
Uh,
awesome. And I'm actually going to be at an event next month in August. And Robert Kiyosaki is one of the speakers. So he's the headline speaker. So
is
I'm
that
actually,
Limitless?
yeah, at Limitless. So
Oh,
I'm kind of
awesome,
looking forward to trying
awesome.
to meet him in person. So,
Oh my gosh, that would be a dream to meet him in person. I've got to make that work out somehow. But yeah, no, I mean, he blew my mind. I mean, my dad is a professor.
yeah. So he's
So
basically, your dad is poor dad, essentially.
the story was wild. And then I had kind of a rich dad when I went to the Naval Academy because I had a sponsor family. And that's a normal thing there because it's like you're this family. They kind of like volunteer to on the weekends when you're not allowed to do anything as a plebe
Yeah.
at the Naval Academy. They kind of take you in. They give you a home cooked meal, and um, I saw a whole different life. I saw like a way wealthier way of living. I
Yeah.
was exposed to so much more at so that really kind of like fired me up too. So yeah, it
Okay.
was a very interesting parallel. Not gonna lie.
Well, and then so when you got started, like, how did you get started in real estate? Like, what, I mean, now you're obviously spreading the good word and teaching other people, but you obviously cut your teeth and did this on your own.
Yes, sir. I probably did things that most people would cringe. Listen, especially like some of your investors who are probably smarter than I was back then. Um, I liquidated my IRA because I didn't know the right way to do things, and I also wanted to go all in, and I also realized that real estate is to a certain degree a tax shelter as well if you play your cards right. And I was like, you know what, I need to actually do this thing. I can't keep talking about this. I need to actually walk the walk. I need to be legit. Right. And so just like in flight school, I would like I would basically force myself to pass my flights and do the studying through peer pressure by like doing group studies. Here, I was like, you know what? Let me start a community and let me actually do the thing and put a spotlight on me so that I have this immense amount of peer pressure that I have to do the thing. And
Right.
so I decided. So I got into it as fast. Like I made so many mistakes. There was another Marine that was into like turnkey investments, and finally, and he was like, you know, this might be the thing. And I was like, you know, I'm just going to push the easy button and just I'm going to go 50-50 on a turnkey property. It's a little 3 bedroom 2 bath. I never saw ever. Still have never seen
Hmm.
in Georgia. And I called USAA and I was like, hey, yeah, that money I have in my account, I want that. They're like, well, you're gonna have to pay. You're gonna have to pay, you know, a penalty and taxes. And I was like, yeah, I know, but I'm going all in on this thing, and I need to do it. And so they were like, well, you need to speak to a supervisor. So I spoke to a supervisor, and he was like trying to be fatherly, like, you know, you're an idiot for doing this. I was like, I know, but I need my money, and so I want it now. And so they gave me my money, and I bought my first rental property. And then 2 months later, I also bought with my parents a 56 unit apartment complex. And that one was also funded with an IRA, but it was a different kind of IRA. It was their 529 education funds I told them to liquidate. I didn't know that you could invest in real estate out of IRAs or retirement accounts back then.
Right.
And you know, had I known that, maybe I would have made different decisions. But back then, I'm a very much all in kind of. I can't. I hate indecision. I hate having multiple. I'm like, I'm gonna go do this thing, and so that's how I did it. And my parents, like all their life savings, like imagine how difficult it was to have that conversation with a dad who was a Harvard and MIT graduate, like all about education, was also now obsessed with philosophy, was a professor at this point. All of his earnings he put into 529 accounts for my siblings, right?
Yeah.
That's logical. It makes sense. And here I am calling him and saying, like, you're never going to be able to see your grandchildren because you're putting your life savings away into college funds. And so I called him and I was like, liquidate it. And then it wasn't like my parents were rich. So this was everything to them. And we went all in and we bought a 56 unit. And it was a terrible first couple of years figuring it out. But now it makes my dad more than his W-2 professor salary, you know? And
Yeah.
and and so and the last deal I did, I raised money from over half of the money I had to raise. Like it was like 1.3 million I raised from IRAs, which is I think why we're talking in a very direct sense is like that is an incredible way to let people not have to liquidate retirement accounts and benefit from real estate and the compounding effects of real estate with the equity and appreciation and cash flow instead of maybe what the markets can do for you. So
Right. Well, I mean,
sorry, that was a lot.
yeah, no, that's great. I mean, it really sets the stage that, and a lot of people do that. I mean, maybe early on when they don't have a lot of money in these accounts, they don't know that they can create an IRA that would allow them to invest in real estate. So we get a lot of people who say, "Hey, look, when I was in my 20s, I actually had the first amount of money that I really saved up was a small 401k, and then I liquidated that to kind of get my start, and then I restarted a new business, and then this time I decided to leave it in there. And if I needed access to it for private investments, I used a self-directed type IRA, like a provider similar to Rocket Dollar,
Right.
to make those private and alternative investments. So after doing your own deals, then you've kind of now turn this into, let's go back to the community and let's talk about that, because I think that
I
there's
love
a
that.
group of people listening to our show who might say, hey, I'm interested, I'm trying to find my people and I want to get into this. And I love the motivation that you had was looking at that, and you describe a story that I think a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, and maybe investors look at. Which I had a gentleman on our show a couple months ago. He's the co-host of the Bigger Pockets podcast. A guy named Henry Washington, big investor, and he told me he said on the show that when he decided that he needed to do something else and kind of learn and go all in on something like real estate, it just clicked for him. Was he had a family, and he realized that he couldn't do the things he wanted to do with his family if he just kind of stayed working. He was a developer at Walmart at the time, and he just said, even with the pay raises and over time, it doesn't leave a lot for me to do the things that I want to do for them. It wasn't internal; it was like more external. And you were kind of the same way. It's like I can't provide the life that I want to give to. At the time, you were dating the person; now you're married. If I keep going the route I'm going. And in the military's case, it's kind of funny. At most corporate jobs, you obviously have no idea when the pay raises will come and what amounts they'll be. But in the military, it's actually a grid. It's like a very sophisticated grid. So you know exactly what your pay grade's going to be after a certain amount of time. But going back, like, your motivation to get started, I think is not that dissimilar from other people that we've talked to become very, very successful as private investors. But in your case, I guess like his as well, you're now taking this to a point where you're using this and rolling it into a business where now you teach people. So you can tell us a little bit about that, because I thought that was really cool when we were talking about that last time.
Absolutely. You know, a lot of times, and there's a almost maybe let me address like the elephant in the room. It's like, hey, if you're benefiting from real estate and you're doing so well in real estate, like why do you teach it? Like, well, why do you do that? And in all honesty, it was that I knew a couple of things. If I
Mm-hmm.
don't teach it, I will never know it deeply enough. So I figured out early on that when I teach somebody something,
Mm-hmm.
I force myself to go Barney style, as we used to say, and just go step by step and really understand the material. And I remember when I made my first few video courses, like it forced me to get so much better at the knowledge. The other thing was I knew I needed peer pressure, and I didn't have the money for a coach or something like that. So I just created the peer pressure, right? Like I created a community and I told them, "Hey, I'm going to do this." And uh and that's what kind of like helped me do more than I ever thought possible. And sure, there's like there's revenue and money and education, but that is what accelerated my ability to do more so that then I can almost in a sense be like this glorified guinea pig. And so I remember sitting on my couch in San Diego. My wife was I think at the time she was visiting uh home in Ukraine. So this is like the first time she went back to visit Ukraine after we got married. And so I was alone for like a week or two, and I was just sitting there trying to think. I was like trying to use that time to figure out how I was going to do my business. What was I going to do with this idea I had of teaching this? And the idea came to me because I loved the Smart Passive Income podcast. Was like this play on words of I'm active duty and I'm trying to figure out passive income. Now, I'm not going about the overhyped misnomer of passive income where you just do nothing and money shows up, but like the true sense of what passive income is. And so I came up with this active duty passive income. And then it became a shortened term, ADPI, and we grew like out of nowhere, people started showing up. Like out of the woodwork. Like I didn't think anybody else in the military cared about this stuff. Like in my squadron, there was very few people like I was the oddball, right? And it was like, why don't you just go, drink beer and watch football on the weekends kind of thing. And eventually more and more military started showing up out of nowhere. And then I started bringing team members on, and we started teaching more. We started doing online events, and we started an online community. We started a Facebook group. I was building this website because I had some computer science and IT background as my major in the military. Or sorry, at the Naval Academy. That's what I majored in. And so it kind of just like started growing like crazy. And now, we're about to do our 5th annual event in San Antonio, and we're going to have like, I don't know, 250 people there, just like all military entrepreneurs excited about figuring out real estate investing, building businesses, whatever the case may be. It's a very electrifying room. It's a very interesting environment. It's not just like, some like convention where it's just sponsors sponsoring each other. It's like it's about the people and the amazing sponsors that come that support that mission, right?
Yeah.
And so that that's what we built. And now our legacy started with a simple book. It was military house hacking. I was so mad that I had people in my life that early on convinced me not to buy a house when I was in flight school. And I look back, and that was the single biggest miss, right? I had other friends in flight school, flight students that would buy a 4-bedroom house, a little simple little 4-bedroom, 2-bath. They would
Yeah.
rent out the other 3 bedrooms. It would pay for their mortgage and beer money. you know and I was just like, wow, I really screwed up. Like, why didn't I do that? Instead, I'm throwing my money away to rent to make somebody else happy. Somebody else outsourced their mortgage payments to me, basically. I was like, screw this. And I was so mad about it. So I wrote this book as basically a manifesto to all the things I wish I would have done. And it did tremendously well. And then from there, people were like, well, how'd you get this 56 unit? And I was like, you know what? I gotta like lean into that now, because it sounds like some people want to do more than buy a house with a VA loan or rental here and there. And
Right.
so I learned about this concept of syndicating, which I didn't realize I almost kind of did with my parents, although it was a joint venture. And I realized that I can raise money from investors and do this at scale. And by the way, the investors will pay me similar to like a commission or an acquisition fee for buying the thing. And then they might give me asset management fees depending on how I structure it. They'll give me part of the pie, right? Like 20, 30,
Right.
40% of the entire deal, as long as I give them their preferred returns. And like, there's all these things and I was like, oh my God, like let's do this. So me and some of the basically partners and friends that I met by building ADPI, we got together and we went and bought an 80-unit apartment complex with other people's money and a 71 pad mobile home park with other people's money. And we crushed it. Partly lucky with some of the timing and COVID, I'm not going to lie, but like for the most part, like we really did a good job. We complemented our individual skill sets, and we made it happen, and we didn't spend a single dime of our own money doing it. Yes, there was risk capital up front, but then the investors paid that back to us as well. And we were obsessed. We were like, this is the way. And
Right.
as that was happening, I started, like a lot of other military wanted to learn how to do that too. And so we started teaching them how to do that too. And now it has turned into like this concept of a cohort where we focus so deeply on building teams, because we realize in business and in investing, people, the who, not the how, right? People are the most important element. So we teach people, military members, reservists, retirees, veterans, active duty still, military spouses, how to build teams together, raise money from investors, and buy large apartment complexes together. And it's been a very exciting experience, and it's very rewarding.
So this was like a structured a class, and then I'm assuming that the people that get together, for the most part, maybe they don't have to be, but are they in a geographic area similar to each other, so they can kind of do
No,
this
not
work, or it could just be wherever?
yeah, not at all. Which is why I think it's appealing. Like, um, I had to learn personally how to be an asset manager remotely because of the military. And
Mm,
so I walked into it without that notion that I needed to be next to my property. And so I built around that constraint. And I think that's what gave me the confidence to teach it in this way. And just being the military, like you move around a lot. So that obviously is a disadvantage if you have to be next to a property. But the way we teach it is like if you're there's several different roles on the team. And I would say that if you're going to be the asset manager on the team, like the person who's like managing the contractors and the property manager, like after the property is acquired, the business is acquired, it helps that if you really know that area well, right? Or if you are nearby for that role. But if you're like the person doing the acquisition, so we call them the deal acquisition specialist, or you're the capital raiser, investor relations, or you're the underwriter, you don't necessarily like the person that analyzes the deal and builds the business plan. You don't
Yeah.
necessarily have to be geographically there at all, right? And so that's where you can leverage other skill sets on a team and be almost still fully remote and make it happen. I mean, sometimes you're gonna have to travel to the property. Um, I always recommend starting with like pick a market. Don't go crazy. Pick a big market that's doing well. Pick a secondary, tertiary city nearby that market. And just
Yeah.
a place that somebody on your team knows decently well, and just go all in. Like overthinking it is only going to delay the outcome.
That makes sense. Yeah, I like that advice for sure. And so for you, maybe tell us the specific. You reference this one event that you have coming up for people. Because this podcast itself goes pretty far and wide, and you mentioned
Hmm.
San
Hmm.
Antonio. So what?
Yes,
Tell me
sir.
the dates of that, and then maybe like where people can find it, the name, and so forth.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. So it's called the Military Real Estate Investing conference. And so the way we sometimes just lovingly call it like MilRecon, REICon, right? So you can find it. We have a few websites that'll point to the same destination, but like MilREICon.com or militaryreicon.com all goes to the same place. You can
Hmm.
find out all about it on that webpage and get your tickets and whatnot. I mean, we are way ahead of schedule this year as far as like how many tickets we were anticipating on selling at this point. So I do think it's going to sell out. So if you guys are listening to this and you want to go ahead and snag some. It's going to be October 23rd through the 25th in San Antonio at the river, at the Westin on the Riverwalk. Prime location. It's going to be
Yeah.
amazing. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we're actually going to be there for the river parade for Halloween, actually that weekend. So it's a fun time to be there anyway.
Yeah.
Um, we'll be able to watch it from the balconies of the hotel. It's going to be incredible. And again, it's going to be primarily, I mean, our brand is for the military, right? But so it's mostly military, active duty reservists, retirees, military spouses are going to be like the bread and butter of the attendees, and everybody's just trying to figure out what their next step is. And it's one of those moments where you see somebody doing it, you're like, oh, if they could do it, I could do it, right? And that's I think the power is like that real proximity and giving you that confidence, like I can take the next step, I can keep doing this thing or start this thing or whatever.
Well, and in your case, it's also a group of people that these are people like me, and they're doing things that I can also do, right? Because in your case, you were making these investments, getting started in real estate while you were in the military. So it's like um,
Absolutely.
it, sometimes you don't want to be around the people who will say, "Well, easy for you to be, sort of this part-time real estate investor. You have this job and you make all this money, which affords you extra time." Like in my case, like I may get shipped. I don't know if I got to move somewhere and so forth, depending on what stage of the military you're at. So that makes a lot of sense. And then, you mentioned before, like you kind of create these cohorts, but how does that work? Like, I mean, do you guys like run like just set cohorts throughout the year, or you
Yeah.
try to fill up like I don't know, 20-40 person group, and then
It's
someone on your team is an instructor or like a coach for this?
yeah, all of the above. So essentially, I think so far we're filling up class 12 right now of this
Okay.
year. And so it's kind of based on demand, but we still stick to a schedule to where like we'll pick a certain start date for a particular class,
Yeah.
and we focus on filling up that class, and then that cohort kicks off, and it's basically a three month experience. It is not a course. I just want to be very clear. This is not,
Oh,
this is not like you're going to get like a Google Drive with a bunch of videos and then you're on your merry way. It is you're going to be pushed, you're going to be held accountable, you're going to be building teams, you're going to have to engage with other human beings and build teams and do things, right? For 3 months essentially. It's like a little bit of a college intensive. And you're going to have to dedicate, a handful of hours every week to just going on the calls, doing the homework, engaging with your team to make sure you gain any kind of momentum that's meaningful, right? Like we were just very upfront about that. But the cool thing is they're all, the instructors are essentially graduates from like 4 or 5 years ago who in the military it's common for somebody who in their military occupational specialty, their MOS, they do pretty well in the military after they did the training, and then they come back to the schoolhouse to train future generations because now they're a subject matter expert because they learned the thing, then they did the thing, then they come back. And so our coaches are actually those that have done it and are incredibly successful at it, like in the multiple tens of millions of dollars of assets under management. Some of these individuals it's incredible, and they come back and they're teaching future generations, all branches of the military represented. It's really, really cool because it's so much easier for our students to relate to, like, oh wow, like you're only 4 years ahead of me, look at where you are, right? And these are the people training them on a weekly basis. Every single week there's a class. And we just had our first we started doing graduation events now, so we just had our first graduation event um, just a couple of weeks ago. And yeah, that's basically how it's structured. It's really it's really fascinating to me to see how it's developed almost like
Yeah.
a machine on its own.
Well, no, that's great. And, here at the end, it's that we talked about this before we touched on it, but for people that are not active duty, they have they usually get their start by accessing that TSP. So if nothing else, like our episode is there to show that, hey, one of the things is that you don't necessarily have to liquidate these retirement accounts like an IRA or a TSP and take that tax hit. You can actually just keep the same tax shield around that account, not lose any of the value in penalties and taxes, and then you'll just have more to invest. Typically, to the tune, my guess, in your case, probably like if you had, let's say, $50,000 in that IRA, you might have lost like 20 to 30% right there. So instead of, let's say, 50,000, you started with 35. But in this case, if you open up an account and transfer it in, now you have a full 50,000 to be able to go start doing investing. And so forth. So that'll work out. So
Absolutely.
that's one of the things we'll be talking about our group with you in San Antonio. And that is a great weekend. I'm based in Austin, so I'm only about an hour drive from that hotel, maybe an hour and 15 minutes total. So I've stayed there. I know that area and I've been there that weekend. So it's a pretty fun time to be there.
Yeah, I can't wait. We truly we call it like our Thanksgiving. Like the whole team gets together. A couple hundred of our members, everybody seeing each other again. It's almost like it feels like a Thanksgiving. It's so much fun, but we also walk away with so much more knowledge and learning because it's a community driven organization, right? Everybody's kind of like learning and pushing each other. So I'm pumped to
Right.
see you there in person as well. It's
Yeah.
going to be awesome, and look forward to you teaching how you guys approach um, everything from the TSP to any kind of 401k and IRAs. And because I know that those self-directed accounts have helped me massively, especially on this last acquisition where one of my big capital partners fell out and I had to raise 1.7 million in 7 days. I couldn't have done it without this being a thing.
I got it. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's a big thing now. Lots of accumulated capital in these deals, and people are very interested in going into more tangible things like real estate. I mean, throughout my workday, I kind of leave CNBC and Bloomberg on different TVs, and they talk a lot about these public stock market investing, but most of the conversation is around the same industry or the same 10 companies, something around AI and big tech and so forth. But I think real estate is just something that's really tangible because real estate in St. Pete, where you're at, is different than real estate in Austin, probably different than where you guys bought that 56 unit apartment complex and then the subsequent 80 unit complex. So it's like just a lot of different flavors. And I don't know if it's like safety, but you mentioned, and we'll kind of finish with this part, that you had the timing was sort of that right at the beginning of COVID. So maybe the timing was right. But, as a real estate investing expert, like maybe you can kind of speak at the end here, just last final thought and some expertise, Markian, that you can give to folks. But, like right now, like 2026, I mean, they're projecting that rates actually may increase here at the next Fed meeting. My guess is real estate's been somewhat of a lull, but that seems like a great time to, enter right now.
Yeah. Well, gosh. I could go on and on about this. So first of all, the reason, yes, like sometimes you can time the market, but that's just luck. Nobody can actually time the market. I mean, whatever, doesn't matter. But I did get lucky sometimes. Sometimes I didn't. But what is really lucky is just taking action, right? And so I think the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So getting started with real estate is awesome because we teach you there's 6 profit centers that happen with it. Like there's other people paying down a loan in your name. There's it
Right.
appreciating over time. Okay, I don't care what happens with the world. Yes, there's ups and downs also in the stock market, but over the long run, it's going to appreciate in value. So you have like this diverging equity growth because of pay down and appreciation. Oh, and by the
Sure.
way, if you do your numbers right, it also pays you every single month. Oh, and by the way, the tax benefits are incredible. I don't think my parents have paid any taxes in a few years, right? Because they're a real estate professional. They get to count against my dad's W-2.
Sure.
And it's just, and there's the leverage, right? You don't have to buy the $5 million apartment complex for $5 million. You just have to bring like 1.5 or 2 million, and then you buy the whole piece of pie. Like it'd be so cool if I could go buy $100,000 worth of Tesla for just $20,000, right? But it
Right.
doesn't. I mean, and you can figure out ways to do it, but it's not as mainstream and like developed as how real estate works. And then
Sure.
to your point with the COVID thing is inflation. Real estate beats the government at its game. The government, to a certain degree, has to inflate because it has to, as goods and services keep growing in this country, especially with AI now, they kind of have to sometimes inflate the dollar. They have to print more dollars, but it happened at an accelerated rate during COVID. Like 40% of the money supply or whatever it was, don't quote me exactly, was printed at that time. But what that does is that makes there be more dollars when the amount of real estate didn't grow nearly at that pace. And so you need more of these dollar bills to trade for the real estate. And that's really sometimes it looks like it's appreciation. It's like, oh, that property increased in value or the dollar decreased in value. And so you need more of them to buy the property. And the same thing goes for rent. The rent goes up not because the rent is more valuable, like to rent that necessarily. It might,
Right.
but it's just supply and demand. It's two separate supplies and demand. And so if the thing you're trading for, right, if you're trading dollars for the real estate, if that dollar bill goes down in value because a bunch of it was printed, you're going to have to pay more for the property. And so it's insulated. The government can inflate the dollar, but real estate keeps you insulated, right? Because as long as it stays relatively solid on its own supply and demand, right?
Well, that was a great breakdown. Yeah, I appreciate. We always want to end with you being able to share some of your expertise, but we'll put in the notes the link to the event and ways for people to find you, Markian. But we really appreciate you joining us today. I know you're busy, probably wheeling and dealing, doing some new deals, but thanks for sitting down with us for a few minutes, and then we'll spread the word, share a little bit more about you and the awesome community that you're building or that you have built.
Yes, sir. It is going to be a blast. Thank you so much for having me on. I had a great time sharing with your community and your listeners. So can't wait to see you there. Thanks again.